Rock climbing is really having a moment right now. Famous free solo climber Alex Honnold just climbed a skyscraper on a live stream. Sasha DeJulian braved weather delays to set a record, completing the first free climb ascent of El Capitan's longest route. And now there's Cairn, an indie game that blew past 200,000 units sold within days of launching and is easily one of the best games that I've played lately. Let's check out what's being called one of the most realistic climbing games ever made. So in Cairn, you play as Ava, a kind of tragic character who isolates herself from everyone and sets out to be the first person ever to summit Mount Kami. And despite the goal being relatively simple, to climb to the top of a mountain, the openness of this task is simply incredible. No guardrails, no single paths heading up the mountain, just a giant mountain and your strategy to make it to the summit. The climbing mechanics and the stakes involved can change the experience from being a total zen trip, while at other times it's some of the most heart-pounding gaming that I've done in months. You can control your character's limbs one at a time to, well, climb, and it turns into this constant balancing act of fighting your own greed for making progress faster while also preserving your stamina. Rock climbing in so many other games is often reduced to following the yellow paint or cinematic QuickTime events. Tomb Raider, Uncharted, Assassin's Creed, they all have you scaling impossible cliffs or insane buildings. The mechanics can often boil down to hold the parkour button and go up. But more recently, there's been a growing trend with games like Death Stranding and Zelda with actual stamina and balancing mechanics to make traversal more engaging. And these things have even ramped up further in the last couple years with ultra-punishing platformers like Only Up and Peak, where just one wrong move costs you a ton of progress. But Cairn feels like one of the best rock climbing simulators that firmly grounds the whole experience in real-world techniques. You have to find all the cracks and ledges to brace yourself against as you climb. The physics and actual movement mechanics are also highly realistic, at least from my understanding of climbing and even seeing professionals talk about this game, and you begin the experience in an actual climbing gym. And at first glance it seems like just a run-of-the-mill starting area, but in this place you could easily spend hours perfecting and learning the different mechanics you'll need. It's also immediately obvious to anyone into rock climbing just how dedicated these developers are. There's tons of subtle details that this game gets right. On some of the tutorial walls, the starting position is actually marked with color-coded tape, just like in real climbing gyms. The climbs are also graded pretty accurately to how they would be in real life. And once you actually begin climbing in the game, the mechanics are incredibly straightforward. Ledges and cracks make for better holds than bumps or faces. Having your feet properly supported and under your center of gravity will preserve your stamina and let you stretch out to reach further. And how you position your hands and feet on the rock face is extremely satisfying, and it looks very authentic, where you move each limb around to its next position, with the game letting you place it basically anywhere your character can reach. And by default, the game automatically selects the best limb to move each time, but you can actually manually select each one at a time as well. When you first start off, you might feel overwhelmed and avoid using full manual control, but once you get a grip, pun intended, on the mechanics, the manual control basically puts you in a flow state with your character. It just becomes far more instinctual, and it's really satisfying. Now, without good purchase on the rock, your limbs will start to shake, and eventually you'll lose grip and fall, causing you to die and reset in the game. You can use pitons to anchor yourself to the wall and give yourself a break to recover stamina. They also catch you when you fall. Again, these are all real-world mechanics. And the race to reposition and get your stamina can get intense, with the color slowly fading as you come within seconds of falling. There were so many times where I'd be climbing in a zen state only to find myself with no ledge to grab or no clear way up, with the next landing just a few body lengths out of reach. And while Cairn's normal difficulty does let you save at various checkpoints, they're manual save points and you need to interact with them, and they're rarely part of the actual climb itself. So when all your limbs are shaking and you know you're one handhold away from falling with your next landing just beyond reach, that's potentially minutes or even hours of progress on the line, and the panic hits like no game I've ever played. And I've played horror games that were less intense than Cairn, and every time I fell, I knew it was my fault and that I could have done it if I took my time or was more strategic about how I went up the mountain. And that's really part of the addicting nature of this game, is that you know you can do better, and as soon as you lose, you have a good idea about how to do better. At one point I found myself in a cave with walls that were too hard to peat on, so you have to make it up basically unassisted. There was an opening at the top of the cave, and I must have tried to get up to it at least 6 times, only to fall and fail each time. And even though I ultimately did give up and carried on up the mountain, hours later I was still thinking about how I could have made it up this cave with just a few adjustments to my technique. And while you do have those pitons to give yourself breaks and safety lines to avoid falls, it's really on you to remember to place them, and you can only use 6 at a time. Plus you also need to manage your health, hunger, hydration, temperature, all of which negatively affect your stamina as they drain. You also have chalk that you can apply for stronger holds. Rain makes the rocks more slippery, and when the sun sets, it can actually be really challenging to spot your next holds. All that is to say that there's no hand-holding, again, pun intended, in Cairn, but there's also no punishment for experimenting or taking detours. Even when you're ultimately only going sideways on the mountain, it still feels like an accomplishment. And I love that the game is so hands-off, and it just gives you a ton of freedom. So much so that I missed some vital items right at the start. Apparently there was supposed to be a map that you can get showing you the various suggested routes and their difficulties for the first section of the climb. A map that I either missed or ignored, because later I found a map in one of the many tucked away caves on the mountain that showed the routes through the following section with some collectibles highlighted. You don't need this map though. And honestly, the game seems like it's kind of encouraging you or even taunting you to go out of your way to explore. I found a bear's den in a cave, and there was a frog jumping around that I could lick and have an acid trip. Certainly not something I was expecting to find, but it was a welcome surprise and one of those little reminders that this game really wants you to check out the whole area. Now, Mount Kami has a whole history of its own, with a cable car that offered prospective climbers a shortcut, and it's long been abandoned, but the remains peek out from the rocks with bright red bits of metal visible from below. And I went out of my way to climb up to the cable car station at the top of the ascent and found a bunch of supplies, plus a cave below it covered in glow-in-the-dark graffiti. There's also homes, schools, fish farms, and other signs of long-gone civilization left on the mountain. It's also refreshing just not having an objective marker demanding you to visit some of these places that you could easily avoid for a more direct route up the hill. The game just lets you do what you want. And much like the climbing gym at the start, you could easily spend hours replaying Cairn just to find all the interesting caves and point of interest tucked away. It's honestly been hard balancing my desire to explore everything with the actual task of making it up the hill, because neither feels like a waste of time, even though the goal ultimately is to get to the top. Now, I was playing the game on normal difficulty. There is then of course free solo mode with no pitons, no belay, no saves or assists, and permadeath if you fall. So if you're really looking to challenge yourself, Cairn will push you to the absolute limit. Once you beat the story mode, you can also play expeditions that offer additional challenges. Truly, Cairn is a very unique game with an incredibly well-designed climbing mechanic that carries the weight of everything on its back. There's story, there's loot, there's other more typical gameplay elements that you would expect from most genres, but the rock climbing gameplay is what makes Cairn work, and it is much deserving of the success that it is receiving. What do you guys think? Have you played Cairn yet? And what do you think about climbing really entering the zeitgeist in a big way? Did you watch the recent live stream? Have you seen any of those crazy documentaries? Let me know in the comments. And up next, check out Star Wars Genesis, a technically non-Star Wars game that is honestly one of the better Star Wars games you can play right now. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is LevelCap, signing off.